Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. How are you doing?
Me?
Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Sweet.
awesome.
I'm
It's
just
so great to get to talk to
a bit
you.
late.
No, no, don't even worry. Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is
Hey, it's my
very
pleasure.
exciting.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, yeah. My name is Andrew. I live in California. Next Saturday, I'm moving to Brooklyn for the rest of the summer because I booked an off-Broadway production called Orion and the Goat Man, where I'm puppeteering for them. So that'll be really exciting.
Definitely.
And I like making little short little documentaries and little movies on things that interest me on YouTube just to sort of have like a resume of things that I can sort of show people, you know.
Definitely. Am
Yeah,
I?
yeah.
I'm not coming in and out. Am I? You've got good visuals and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you
Okay,
look great. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I
cool.
started
I mean, we
watching the
have.
Imagine.
I was
Oh,
gonna
sorry, my bad.
precurse. So there. Are you familiar with the Brooklyn indie band Laundry Day?
No, I'm not, but I can write that down.
So there's a band in Brooklyn. It's a Brooklyn Laundry Day. They recently opened up for Ed Sheeran, but before
Oh,
that, they were
wow.
opening for Tizo Touchdown, and then before that, that was Neon Trees. But back in, I guess, a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, they Coveralls compilation album that we released in 2003, 23, excuse me. One of the members grew up in New Orleans when he was very young, and then of course relocated to Brooklyn, like you'll do for the summer. Um,
Yeah.
and so I know his dad, and so I reached out, and this is really before they kind of gotten big. This was really sort of like they were sort of in the, but they got new management, and the new management phenomenal job. But their whole, because like you, I'm a curious individual, and I'm always interested in bands and how they brand themselves. And before they were sort of kind of
Mhm.
fluttering, and then their new management really branded them as um, identifying with New York. And they were New York
Mhm.
centric, almost like what the BC Boys did back in the day. You knew they came from New York. That was every part of what they did, was they let you know that. And so they've
Mhm.
since the last year rebranded themselves to associate indie music Brooklyn with Laundry Day. So if you go there, I'm curious to know your experience. You get that vibe being at Ground Zone
Yeah.
there in Brooklyn. So pretty interesting to see. So anyway, short story about Brooklyn
Yeah,
and
I'll
our
definitely
group there. So
yeah,
the
I'll definitely
whole summer
look
there.
into them once I get there. Yeah, yeah, I'm there until
Great,
August. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. So the thesis I sort of have for this video with you is I want to, um, in my opinion, music is a very magical, powerful thing that I grew up doing musical theater from the age of 5 and dance, and I can play a few instruments, not very well, but music has always sort of been like a very integral part of me as a person, and I want to make a video about the power of music. That's like the generalized thesis of the video. And where I think you guys come in is that love of music comes directly from watching the show growing up. I was born in 2004, so I'm kind of in the very like prime group of people who grew up watching the show, and it's like most of my general music taste comes from like a lot of the mover songs feel like they're inspired by that like early 90s sort of like beach, like a U2 or the Police or something like that. They feel very like inspired. And yeah, so I have 6 or 7 questions here, and I'll stop taking up more of your time.
Oh, it's quite all right.
Yeah, I think my first question is, from what I've read about you, you've always sort of been an educator and a musician. Those are two very big things, and I want to know why you decided to bridge the gap between the two, and what was that sort of experience like?
So I think for me personally, and I think sort of Dave will echo this in certain interviews that he does, but When we started, like you said, I was an educator, and my experience, my empirical observation was that as I was teaching, every group of kids that would come in, I was seeing this sort of uh, degrading ability to be imaginative. So, like, for example, if there was a creative writing assignment or something, you would get a lot of kind of regurgitation of like maybe a SpongeBob episode or something like that. It was nothing that was like overly creative. And not that I set my expectations high, but, I always had sort of this view of try to empowering kids to look at a stick, and I use this kind of metaphor as anything but a stick. It can be a flute, it can be a baton, it could be a drum or drumstick instead of sticks. It could be anything but just a stick. You can use the power of imagination to really elevate that into anything that you want it to be. And so as an educator, I saw this sort of like this empirical observation of kids just not being as creative as I thought they could be given opportunities. And so I think one of the reasons we started the Movers was really to encourage creativity in kids. And initially the whole idea of the Movers was that it was a metaphor for the brain, of a child's brain, where problems would come. And then we would go to work in the idea warehouse, which is just essentially a brain. That's why there's so many rooms there. It's really limitless and infinite in that respect. And so to get to your question, we had this full concept for the TV show where we were sort of the physical manifestation of the child's problem-solving creative process. Like that you could just try something, like even embodied in my character, something crazy, but it might work, And so when we had this full idea and started pitching it, people loved the concept. I made sure that the educational dogma was super strong. It got into multiple intelligences and things like that. But with this wonderful idea comes the reality that most entities did not have the money to facilitate that idea. But what we could control was the music, because it was always a music-based show. And so at that time, in our early career, the music took sort of the front seat, and the TV show took the back seat, and that was really became a core tenet for what we did. And that's why in every concert we will always encourage kids to pick up a musical instrument and learn it, because developmentally it's so powerful, and not only just how it and the brain research that goes with just learning music as a young person goes without saying, but that was what we sort of pushed kind of all our chips in on, was music and creativity. And that's why we didn't really use tracks when we play live. I'm the worst pretend player. You could probably notice that on the TV show. It's like, I guess by your words, I'm very similar to you in that I'm not a great musician. I'm an okay musician. I can get, but like if I'm playing the piano, I need to look at what I'm doing. So I can't look at the audience and be like super hyperactive and then also play the piano at the time. I just don't have that ability. Even though I've been doing it forever. So like when you watch the TV show, I'm the worst lip syncer, and pretend player of a musical instrument ever, simply because I have to engage with the camera and not the musical instrument. That's just a sidebar. I think for me at the ground floor, it's always been creativity's always been at the forefront of what we wanted to do as a band, whether it be the TV show or music. And by performing live, bad notes and all and clams were part of the creative process. And so we were never like puppets to a track, and not to say that there's anything wrong with people who use tracks in live situations, but for us, there's an energy that's created that is palpable and very real when it comes to being able to change on a dime in a live setting, musically speaking. And so I think to answer your question, for us, music became sort of the tenet of the creative process, and encouraging kids to explore music as a way to encourage, to promote their ability to be creative.
Yeah, yeah. Was that sort of while you were creating the show, was that sort of your like mission statement throughout the developing of it? And has that sort of statement changed now that the show is over and you're still doing still doing like live performances?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if we've ever changed, the core, what we believed in what we were doing. And so for us, it's still relevant, to encourage creativity, model problem solving, foster independence, all of those kinds of ideas that were part of our dogma have remained the same. And I think, we wouldn't be doing it unless we still enjoyed what we did, but also believed wholeheartedly in our ability to possibly influence a young kid to pick up a musical instrument and learn it, or to think, big, and to reach high, to work hard and have fun. I think those have always been part of what we do and continue to do.
Yeah.
And so, for us, those things are continue to make what we get to do enjoyable and meaningful. And it's probably why we, as friends before and are still friends now, continue to do what we get to do, is just because of the joy, the interaction, and of course, at the end of the day, hearing a kid picking up a musical instrument because they went to a Movers concert or something like that. That's a legacy you want to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a news clip of Smitty and Rich talking about how you've recently had this. A lot of your shows have like college students at it now, and you did your first 18 and up show. How is that different than say 2003 or 2006 when it was mainly a younger crowd? Now that they've like grown up, how has that changed?
It's a weird experience in the sense that at its heart, even college age kids, I don't want to say long for the wholesomeness that is sort of embodied in the Movers show, but when we played Lollapalooza last year, that was one of the things that everybody said. It was like, I can't believe this experience is so wholesome, and all we were doing was playing basically our songs. We added some strategic covers here and there, but our concert was no different than what we do for, our 5 to 10-year-old audience. But I think, I guess to some degree, there's something that I've noticed, especially with college age students that I teach at university at UL, and it is this kind of, nostalgia, this slug of nostalgia of like when life was a little simpler, and you did like exams and papers and all this kind of, looming on the horizon, where, maybe your day was spent watching, Disney Junior or something like that, or Playhouse Disney or whatever it was being branded at the time, and then seeing our show and just enjoying that kind of 22 minutes of silliness and fun and good music. And so I think for that, having these 18 plus shows, everybody's like, hey, how different it's going to be? Are you guys going to go blue or anything like that? And it's not, that's not necessarily the case. It's just sort of like a appreciation for the audience that brought attention to us to begin with, that watched the show when they were young, and that, to see us even now and experience us now and kind of like be reminded of just that kind of wholesome nature of the whole experience, whether it be in 2008 or 9 when they were watching the show versus 2024, because I mean, the world's so complex and inundated with so much information that it becomes, we become anxious because there's just so much thrown at us, and we just don't really have the faculties to process all of the, of like something that happens in Thailand that I am now, intimately familiar with, that really has no bearing on my life per se, but I can worry because I'm an empathetic person, or something like that. And it's just sort of like pushing all that aside and just kind of existing in a moment, being in the moment, enjoying the moment. And that moment is just really this relationship between the band and the fans, and that's becomes sort of ageless in that respect.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. What was the relationship with Disney like? How did that develop, and how did like the Movers change from being an indie band from Louisiana to Playhouse Disney show? Like, what was that transition
Well,
like?
the good thing is like, I mean, our relationship with Disney is obviously sort of a super complex one.
Hmm.
They were great partners, but then of course the business side of them was really kind of cutthroat in that respect.
Hmm.
You'll hear bands like who signed a not so great deal, and you're like, oh well, you're on Disney, you must be rolling in the bucks, or you must be this or that, and perception and reality are two different things.
Hmm.
So the good is that, to Disney's credit, they recognized our concept as being a strong one, and they allowed it to be that. And so, for the most part, what you saw on the TV show was 80% the original concept that we had created.
Hmm.
And they really were hands off and allowed us to kind of, I mean, because think about it, it's like, Andy, if I said, hey, I want to do a show with you, and you have some background with kind of like musical theater, as you mentioned, but you've never done a TV show, and then you're sort of, boom, you're doing a TV show, and it's not that you have an imposter syndrome or anything like that. Like in our case, we never felt that, but it was like, we're not actors, we didn't train for this, but we sort of became actors in that respect, and we're not terrible at it, but it was not something that, like, that was part of who we were at the moment. It was just sort of like, so I guess what I'm saying is that it was a gamble for them. We were not actors. We were friends. I was an educator. Smitty was a firefighter, Dave an architect, Rich was a journalist. We made music together, but we were not actors. And so they built this show based on our idea, and really the key was like, could we deliver? And so it was a gamble for them, and of course they allowed it to be organic. They were really hands off of the first 2 seasons, and so for that, I thank them and applaud them. On the flip side, there were things that on the business side that were like, you kind of wish could have been done differently. I think part of it was like, we had a record deal with Disney Records, but then we did the TV show. So Juicebox Heroes, which was on the label, was released through the label. Every subsequent album, like In a Big Warehouse, For Those About to Hop, even Back in Blue, which was a digital release only, all of those became soundtracks to the TV show. So it was this reassignment of our music from going through what would have been our album contract into a soundtrack, which was no longer part of the album contract. So we never really got through the album contract. So it was like those kind of nuances that you had to kind of, at the time, you're just in the middle of it, and so it's the last thing on your mind. But as, of course, post Disney, part of the reason why I went into music business and started studying it was kind of like, look at all the ways we, had to deal with sort of the things we gave up to be part of the experience. So it was with every relationship, I think there's good and bad. And we had a wonderful champion there. We had the crew and the producers that worked on the TV show, and really everybody associated were amazing. Of course, we did come through a time where we were on the channel, and then we went and disappeared for like 6 months, and then resumed on the Disney Junior Premier channel. So it was this gap of time. So it was all these kind of awkward, like weird steps. So the path was never linear. It was always like weaving. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say I think it was sort of a blessing in disguise, because we gained a little notoriety, but we never got like Wiggles famous or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
Where like our privacy was kind of, affected or adversely affected or anything like that. So we sort of kind of got the best of both worlds. We could still have our private lives, but people knew who we were. And then of course we had this sort of Clark Kent Superman, where when we were in our blue suits, we were Superman, and then we could always be Clark Kent, and people might not know who we were, based on on what we were wearing or whatever. So
Oh, that must
it was
be
good. It was
yeah.
good. You know, there were great things, and of course there were things that, you know, you kind of wish would have been able to be done differently. But I think
Mhm.
that's with all relationships, you know, that you kind of there are pits and pearls, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, never a dull moment with Disney.
No, never, never.
Yeah, it's a little bit of my like future goal is I want to, and since I was a child, I want to have my own TV show. That's why I'm in film school, is to make those sort of relations, and I want it to be a children's educational show about nature. And I want to use puppets. That's a whole different thing. But
Yep.
I want to know why children, basically, why educate children, just the like, it's super super important, but what made you decide that that is the target demographic, especially from based on what I read before, you were a middle school teacher, correct?
Well, I was actually sort of upper elementary, so I taught between
Around,
fourth
okay.
and sixth grade, and then from the classroom went into it became sort of a writing specialist
Hmm.
in the parish, which would be a county where you are. Um,
Hmm.
so I think, you know, for me, you know, obviously, you know, this is going to be a little sidetrack, but you know, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and this is years ago, and of course, this is when we were, you know, both newly married, you know, thinking about having families and stuff like that. And, you know, of course, the question that would arise from him was like, or just that you would deal with is like, do you want to bring a child into this world? You know, it's kind of like, you know, is it too dark? You know, what am
Hmm.
I, am I feeding them to the wolves, so to speak? And
Yeah.
I, you know, his answer, like, or in that conversation, that something that stuck out to me was that child was sort of like, as much as we think of the world as being kind of this dark place or just complex place, the child really is this wonderful um, embodiment of innocence and goodness, you know, and there's
Hmm.
something pure there. And I think for us, and especially me as an educator, you know, you respect the innocence, you respect the purity, and you just want to encourage growth and continue that, you know.
Hmm.
um, and I think by saying that, the kind of epitome of the person that we felt did that was Mr. Rogers. You know, Mr.
Oh yeah.
Rogers was by far and away, and of course Captain Kangaroo, which was, you know, sort of
Hmm.
this, you know, cut it from a different cloth, but those were individuals that did what they said. You know, they were
Hmm.
action oriented. You didn't find any like skeletons in the closet. You didn't, you know, they believed wholeheartedly in their mission, and then they lived their lives accordingly. And I think that was like that was sort of like when you start having kids and you're dealing with the raising of your kids, and I think part of this goes hand in hand with what your question is. As a father and as an educator, you want to evaluate children's media, television, film, music, and you want to provide your children with challenging content that remains and keeps their innocence. You're not shielding them from the world. That's not, it's a
Hmm.
different thing. Because like Mr. Rogers dealt with issues, whether it be racism or, you know, death in the family or anything like that. You don't skirt those, but you can handle them in a way um, that is meaningful, that isn't necessarily destructive, that is, you
Hmm.
know, proactive and embodies the tenets that we want to pass down to our children and things like that, to make them strong, to make them you know, to have conviction in who they are and what they believe, those kinds of things. So I think for us, the child, and the reason why we became children's um, you know, musicians or musicians for the families, because the reality was we were having kids at the same time. And me as
Hmm.
an educator, I was on the front lines of like of teaching, and so it sort of married those two things together. And then of course we have the role models of Fred Rogers and Captain Kangaroo to sort of kind of lead the way. We just fused a little of the Beastie Boys and U2 and the Police with that Mr. Rogers kind of path.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Ah, sweet. I have one more question.
Sure.
I have a friend who runs the YouTube channel Justin Talks Puppets. He's really into puppets, and a series that he sort of has is like a where are they now sort of question. So I think my question is, where is Doorhouse Mouse, like the puppet, today, if you know?
Okay, so I know Kevin Carlson, who was the puppeteer for Warehouse Mouse, has one.
Hmm.
I believe the Scott Bright, who was the producer, has one. Now we have a 4-foot version, or maybe it's a 3-foot or 4-foot version. So I actually have that 4-foot version. That was the one we took when we did our live concerts, because
Okay.
you needed sort of this larger size for kids to be able to see it from far away. So
Yeah.
I have that puppet. But I know Kevin Carlson is definitely one of the puppeteer who takes very takes control. Is very serious about maintaining the integrity of Warehouse Mouse.
Hmm.
And if you're interested, I can definitely pass on his email if you wanted to talk to him.
Oh yeah, that would be incredible, actually.
So I can definitely send that information to you, and if you want to have a conversation with him, especially as a puppeteer,
Yeah.
I'm sure he would love to speak to you about it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. That would be that'd be incredible.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think I have any other questions for you.
No
Um,
worries.
yeah, thank you so much for your time. This has been like I said earlier, I've been watching the show forever. And it's kind of surreal. I told all my friends, I'm like, you'll never believe what I'm doing tomorrow.
Well, great.
Yeah,
Hey, continued success in your studies at university. Enjoy your summer.
thank
Um,
you.
Continue to push yourself to, be creative as an individual. Never let that kind of lessen because of the money trap of like having to pay for the bills. That's the reality. But you can find a nice balance of being a creative individual and then paying the bills.
Yeah,
I wholeheartedly believe that. It's just a matter of like hard work. And so, with our motto, reach high, think big, work hard, have fun, it served us well. So hopefully it'll serve you well as well.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.